Kia ora koutou, Marky here with one of his late ND reviews, Earley's late reviews as we like to call it. Okay, so I want to talk about John Wyndham's The Chrysalids. Okay, so you know, this is more evidence against the fact that I maintain that I don't really like science fiction, in that I ended up reading, or I should say listening to this book. I listened to it by audiobook on good old YouTube with Robert Powell doing the narration. He was rather good, actually. He had a few odd, kind of slightly over-actory phrases and words that he used, like waft, whereas I would say waft, but he said waft, and a few other little actory affectations. But other than that, he did a brilliant job. He was really good. And so why did I stumble upon that? So I don't know, really. I think John Wyndham just came to mind. I mean, I grew up, I was very young when I first watched I think it was a BBC TV series, The Day of the Triffids, and really enjoyed it. And it just, I don't know, it just came to mind. I ended up watching it as an audiobook. So what did I think of it? Well, I usually put a lot of preface in to the videos like this, and one of the things that I usually say is that there are videos that I make that I know a lot about because they're part of my main profession. So I've just done one which is all around when children act out sexually with other children, and that's based on a lot of evidence and research and stuff like that. And there are things that I talk about that I have no expertise on, but a bit of an opinion. This would fit into this category, although sliding doors and all that. When I was at school, I was had a real mix of skills and deficits, the spiky profile that I talk about in some other videos. But I was very good at English literature, and I ended up taking the O-level a year early, and I ended up getting an A grade A-level in English literature. So I was very good at comprehension reviewing books, discussing books, that kind of thing. Literature, fiction, but I never went down that road. I nearly did. I went off in a completely different direction. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, really. So I'm reviewing a book, I guess, and I'm well out of that world, so although I read things and I'm aware of literature, I'm not in that literary kind of world. And I sometimes watch YouTube lectures, on literature and stuff. Some of them are really enjoyable, really good. So I could have been a good book reviewer, have that potential, but yeah, because I've been out of that world for so long, I haven't really followed literature or been in that environment for so long. This falls into my ND Neurodiverse late reviews category. So this is just my opinion. I usually miss the most important things go over the top of my head these days. I often misunderstand things, and worse with films, actually. Books I'm a little bit better, but films I lose the plot literally very quickly. So anyway, preface over. What did I think of it? So there are nearly always spoilers in my reviews, so watch out for spoilers. I thought this was beautifully written, and Robert Powell made it a real pleasure to the ears to hear the words, and it's kind of interesting because I did read Day of the Triffids when I was very young, and I can't remember anything about the literary style or anything like that, but really really nice use of language. So my only criticism, some people have criticised the ending. Apparently, that's something that critics have kind of picked on, and said the ending's a bit messy, and maybe it is. But my only criticism is that the language, although it's very eloquent, very very beautiful prose, in the narration, which comes from one of the characters, who presumably is somebody who's a little bit older, kind of reflecting on what happened. where there are characters speaking, they often speak with the same degree of eloquence, often in a very formal way, where it just doesn't feel right for the characters. And a lot of that is exposition. So it's almost as if, although he does, write the characters quite well so that they're distinct. When he wants a character to give us a little bit of information, he will slip into this very highfalutin use of English, and it will come from the mouth of the character. And it just doesn't sort of sound right because people don't talk like that. People write like that, and a narrator can kind of use that turn of phrase, if you like, or use that kind of language. But a character just wouldn't really. So that's my only, and that didn't really bother me too much, really. But that was my only criticism. So it's a dystopian novel, but it's also a utopian novel. It's got kind of both in there. And I thought it was kind of interesting because obviously The Day of the Triffids is another dystopia. Also the same themes of mankind destroying itself through folly, and through misuse of technology. And also, because this is written, I think it's published in 1955. I think probably written sort of shortly before then. So it's influenced, I think a lot by, what happened in Nazi Germany, and all the kind of National Socialist philosophy around purity, and really kind of ask the question, what is purity? What makes people, what is racial purity all about? What is purity is humanity all about? It looks at religion and how religion can kind of get distorted, and how politics kind of creeps into religion. It looks at dogmatism, and zeal. There's a really interesting character in there called Axel. It's interesting. I'm kind of trying to work out why. Names in novels and films always intrigue me because I think often there's a reason behind Axel. Because a lot of the, I tried to work out. I thought I had a kind of working theory that maybe the kind of conservative characters in the book all would have biblical names. And the more radical characters wouldn't, but I don't know. I don't think that really holds water. But Axel, the only Axel I've come across is Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses, and that's spelt differently. So Axel is, a really nice kind of avuncular character. I think he is an uncle, but he's a very, very avuncular uncle, if there is such a thing. And represents kind of free thought. He's an independent thinker. He's travelled the world a little bit, and he's very quiet. He's not an active rebel, but he stands to one side of the thinking that everybody seems to buy into. With a little, and exists in that world, seemingly quite happily and quite comfortably, but actually, he's not buying into it one little bit, really. And he's got the lead character's back, which I think is really fantastic. The other, purity, and it makes me think, what did this inspire, and I'm thinking again, science fiction. I'm thinking, well, I'm seeing, there's a lot of this kind of, this could have been behind a lot of the Dalek stories. And I think it could be behind, could have been an influence on Nemesis, the 2000 AD cartoon, which I love. It seems to be kind of, the themes are very, very similar. So there's a thing about, totalitarianism. So I guess, John Wyndham is in 1955 is, the Cold War is really hotting up, if you'll excuse that mix of metaphors, and totalitarianism and all that kind of. So it's all that stuff is in there, and then there's what seemingly kind of quite almost like a new agey kind of spiritual thing going on about how people can communicate psychically, and I like the way that he talks about the clumsiness of words, how difficult communication is, and how isolated we are by the fact that we have different languages. Words mean different things to different people. Often we don't understand one another, and therefore there's no empathy and no harmony. But there's a kind of thread in there about kind of people that can dispense with words, and therefore and there's much more unity. So it's like to understand all is to forgive all, I think Gandhi said. So I thought that was really interesting in quite a spiritual kind of new agey kind of thing going on. And the character at the end of the book that comes from the utopian society, this is the spoilery bit, it makes me think there's very kind of perfect in body, very quite Aryan actually, ironically, but it makes me think of so among kind of alien theorists, there's a belief that there were lots of sightings and lots of belief at one time about a type of alien that were very into ecology and into trying to save the world, and they were kind of quite beautiful with long hair and very perfect, and these kind of elevated, kind of almost angelic beings, and that's how this character at the end seems to be portrayed, although with a hard edge, with a justifying kind of quite almost genocide effectively. There's lots of contrasts in this, really. If you look at the whole Nazi thing, is that the utopian society basically commit genocide on one particular culture of mutants. Mainly because they're a threat, but also there's a sense of their time is done, and they don't really fit anymore. They won't fit into this new world, and they're killed. And this kind of utopian, kind of angelic, Aryan kind of character kind of justifies that, and kind of gives quite a long discourse on why that's the case. So, I don't know what that's about, really. I don't know what's going on in John Wyndham's mind there with that. It's almost like, if you remember, like, going back to Orwell, you've got Animal Farm, where the human farmer is the tyrant. He's exploiting all the animals, and then the animals take over the farm under the leadership of the pigs, and then within a very short time the pigs are exploiting all the animals. So I don't know whether he's kind of saying that there's this new supposedly much more enlightened, compassionate race are only enlightened and compassionate towards one another, and when it comes to other races, they can be kind of very callous. Makes me think. I remember the Buffy spin-off Angel. That I've never watched many episodes of it because of the timing of it and stuff. But there was this concept there, wasn't there, that the kind of the higher entities, kind of angelic entities, were incredibly harsh. They're almost worse than the demonic entities. I mean, that's just a free-floating thought, really, to just throw in. And the other thing that that was quite interesting for me was, and I didn't expect this, or I had no idea that this was in the scene. Was in the book was that New Zealand is depicted as the place that is least scathed by the nuclear apocalypse, and and that's something that people often say. A lot of people from America and other places are buying properties which they actually call apocalypse bolt holes in New Zealand. And here we are in the middle of the COVID epidemic, and New Zealand is the best place in the world, basically. The fewest cases and the safest place. So that was interesting. Obviously personally, living in New Zealand, Aotearoa, that was a nice little, delightful little twist for me. So yeah, I think what other threads. I liked how I may have said this already. I liked how the Bible has been completely contaminated with political stuff around There's a biblical thing, about kind of destroying anything that's not perfect. And there's also a very practical need to do that, because post-apocalypse, obviously, radiation causes mutations. If you know there's mutations to go on to breed, then everything becomes chaotic, and more mutated, and more there's more and more disability among people, and more I'm guessing, crops potentially become dangerous, or they become inedible, or stuff like that. So there is a very rational reason to, destroy crops, or destroy, or not allow animals to breed that have been affected by this radiation. But it's all kind of turned into religious stuff. So it's not about how it's good for humans. It's about God wants you to do that, because the distortions and the mutations are kind of mocking God in some way. And it made me think about halal and kosher. Because this is the way I think, is that perhaps there will come a time, maybe it's here already, where the world will be in such a place, ecologically and biologically, that there'll be, already, most of, a ton of what we eat is toxic, isn't it? We know that, and lots of foods are toxic, and things like that. That there'll come a point where the people that eat halal and kosher, and any other kind of, religious codes around food, and and to some extent around other behaviours, they will be the people that survive the apocalypse, because by following that code, they will not be exposing themselves to the worst of the toxins, or the worst of the contamination, or whatever it is that's going on. Something about that lifestyle will keep them safe, and they will thrive and continue, where people that don't follow that religion and don't follow those codes will become ill and die. It just occurred to me, I should be a writer, shouldn't I? Except for, very impatient. I'm too impatient to write, really. That maybe encoded in some of this religious stuff is some very practical information, but maybe practical information that doesn't actually, hasn't applied. Didn't apply when those books of, when the Quran was being drafted, and when the books of the Bible were being written with with the kosher codes and things like that in there. It didn't actually make any difference then, and it doesn't make any difference for thousands and thousands of years. But then it reaches a point in history where actually that's vital, vital survival information that's been encoded and placed in, in the hands of man for so long. I like that as an idea. It might be complete nonsense, but it's a cool idea, isn't it? Final point, you'll be glad to hear, is something that I wondered as I was reading this, because there was a reference in the book to the crown of creation, and instantly I thought, oh, Jefferson Airplane. Jefferson Airplane are brilliant. So Jefferson Airplane, kind of American rock band with millions of members, famous for White Rabbit, based on Alice in Wonderland, famous also for Somebody to Love. Is it Somebody to Love or Someone to Love? Not the Queen one. Fantastic band. And then they reformed, or some members reformed, and became Jefferson Starship, which were a bit kind of album orientated rock, kind of, I like all kinds of rock music, but that's kind of very much the kind of the danger zone for me is rock, is where where you get to to that kind of 1980s Mr. Who else? There are a whole bunch of rock bands where the guitars were kind of toned down a little bit in the mix, and it was a little bit squeaky clean. It was very well produced, very kind of commercialized, very kind of rock without the rough edges. And Jefferson Starship were a little bit like that, weren't they? But I do have, I do like some of their stuff actually. That's my guilty pleasure. But Jefferson Airplane, yeah, wow, what a band. And Crown of, and I looked this up, and Crown of Creation is indeed a song based on the Chrysalids by John Wyndham. And it's got lines in there like they cannot, I'm not sure if it's they cannot tolerate our kind or they cannot tolerate our minds, but either of which would fit. And then the line with we cannot tolerate their obstruction, which is kind of like the line of this kind of utopian society, you know, when they commit their genocide because they can't allow that. They say, oh, we have to. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting that, you know, often anti-Nazi things can become very kind of Nazi sounding, can't they? It's like, it was used to intrigue me that the Daily Mail, which is, you know, Britain's most right-wing paper, was always running articles about how bad the Nazis were, you know, and stuff like that. And you know, and if you kind of think about, you know, certain people like Winston Churchill, Dennis Wheatley, you know, people that used to kind of that write a lot or were involved in defeating Nazism. Obviously, Winston Churchill actively involved in defeating Nazism. Dennis Wheatley wrote a lot of that stuff, novels where the Nazis were the enemy. He was very right-wing, and a lot of his characters were very right-wing. So it's kind of interesting that you kind of get these, you know, this kind of mirroring of people that kind of, you know, seem to be very anti-Nazi, but actually they've got the seeds of that within themselves. And this you know, this society of, you know, especially more spiritually evolved, empathic, angelic-looking, you know, future humans. Have got they've got kind of almost like another side of the Nazi. They're manifesting another kind of another dimension of fascism and Nazism, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, nice. You know, that was nice for me. 2 little surprises in there. Really was the because I always used to listen to that Jefferson Airplane. It's a great song, and I think, what the devil's that about? And now I know, which is really nice. And I kind of like the fact that, you know, New Zealand was the place that survived the apocalypse, because, you know, we seem to be heading for one, and I'm here at the moment. So, you know, on lots of, you know, personal self-indulgent levels, I enjoyed the book. So, yeah, recommend it. But I'm assuming that you already know it if you're watching this, because I've already told you there are spoilers. Not too many. I don't think what I've said will spoil your reading. Oh, a final thing then that does relate to the very end of the book. And I'd be kind of interested in other people's thoughts on this, is they describe a vehicle which has travelled from New Zealand to kind of Newfoundland area-ish, which is where it's kind of it's set in kind of, you know, very short time, and it's described a little bit like a helicopter. It's kind of, you know, it's kind of hinted at that it might be a bit like a helicopter, but also that it's kind of, I think, white and fish-shaped. Now, I'd be really intrigued to know, you know, whether anyone knows any more about what exactly John Wyndham had in mind here, and whether he was referencing some kind of helicopter or helicopter-like craft. I'd love to. I did Google to see if there, you know, there are any artists' images of this. You know, whether anyone brought this image to life. So that was quite interesting. I didn't know quite what to make of that. You know, when you're reading a book and you're getting these descriptions and you're trying to form these images in your head, you know, and sometimes, you know, sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes it's quite, hey, well, I'm not quite sure how to picture that. So that one was a bit of a mystery to me. So I'd love it if anyone has seen any artistic depiction of that, and they could link me to it. I'd love to see that. So thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with this ramble, which has gone on, you know, far longer than I ever thought it would. I thought this would be a 10-minute video. Love to hear your thoughts on the book. So stick your thoughts in the comments. And if you liked it, click the like button. If you didn't like it, just keep that quietly to yourself. And I will see you in the next video. Rangi Marie.